Kazakhstan is a landlocked country in Central Asia and bordered by Russia and China on both sides. The country was a part of erstwhile Soviet Union and broke away in 1990 to form a unitary political party-dominated republic. The central land mass was proud of its huge petroleum reserves and its relatively stable government. Among all its neighbors, the Kazakhs boasted of an inclusive society and had huge FDI inflows from the USA. It is estimated that nearly $190 billion of American funds flew into Kazakhstan in the recent years, propelling its prosperity and growth. The government stated that its citizens earned close to $600 per month and was emerging as a highly peaceful state. However, late December saw a huge uprising against the current government. The protests have escalated so far that the president requested Russian troops to defend its major cities against the protesters. The major reason for the protests is considered to be the rising costs of LPG, which is used to power cars in the region. The protesters are also requesting elections of many cabinet berths which are currently selected by the president. In short, protesters are demanding the ouster of the political forces that have ruled the country without any substantial opposition since 1991. Protests in Kazakhstan incited by anger over surging fuel prices have intensified into something more combustible and bloody. Clashes over the future direction of the country that have prompted a Russia-led military intervention and the killing of dozens of anti-government demonstrators. Hundreds more have been injured. The government said that order had been mainly restored after thousands of angry protesters took to the streets of Kazakhstan, creating the biggest crisis to shake the autocratic Central Asian country since it gained independence in 1991. City Hall in Al-Maty, the country's largest city, was set ablaze. An angry mob took over the airport. Protesters set fire to police vehicles and to the regional branch of the ruling Nurotan party. The police, in turn, accused demonstrators of being responsible for the deaths of 13 officers and for leaving 353 injured. President Tokayev has authorized the nation's security forces to fire without warning. The harsh response is a reflection of the stark challenges he faces less than 3 years into his rule, and seems to portend a protracted crackdown on all forms of dissent, including anti-government activists, human rights advocates and independent journalists. Russia plays an important role in the region. Kremlin considers it's a body double of the Russians in terms of political and economic processes. Like other Central Asian economies, Russians have significant influence in the region. The protests have been so sweeping that the Collective Security Treaty Organization has been asked to intervene for the first time in the history of the region. CSTO is very similar to a Russian NATO and may be significant consequences for the region, which is already seeing major uprisings and political instability. For the Kremlin, the events represent another possible challenge to autocratic power in a neighboring country. This is the third uprising against an authoritarian Kremlin-aligned nation, following pro-democracy protests in Ukraine in 2014 and in Belarus in 2020. The chaos threatens to undermine Moscow's sway in the region, at a time when Russia is trying to assert its economic and geopolitical power in countries like Ukraine and Belarus. The countries of the former Soviet Union are also watching the protests closely, and the events in Kazakhstan could help energize opposition forces elsewhere. The region is of utmost importance for the Americans, as the region sees billions of dollars of energy investments from American multinational corporations. Companies like Chevron and ExxonMobil have invested tens and billions of dollars in the region. Although it has close ties with Moscow, consecutive Kazakh governments have also maintained close links to the United States, with oil investment seen as a counterweight to Russian influence. The United States government has long been less critical of post-Soviet authoritarianism in Kazakhstan than in Russia and Belarus. The fresh protests in the region could usher in an Arab Spring of sorts for the region. The region is already ruled by a set of autocratic powerhouses masquerading as democracies under a powerful ally Russia. Though the region is highly blessed with natural resources, the development is often marred by political hegemonies. The region is particularly important for Russian interests. The region in the past have maintained good relationship with Americans and could trigger a Crimea-like annexation in the near future.